I never knew that.
That was the old the ferry boat, the Red Star ferry boat.
Meath.
Well, going to Meath. We're glad to have you, Hugh Heatley. You're with me here in studio. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Warren Point Historical Society. You know, the Warren Point Forum. We were talking about the pride of Warren Point a while ago. And the almost £1 million you're getting for the park, for goodness sake.
Oh,
it's unbelievable.
Pittance, just a pittance. I think it's to alleviate the not getting the bridge.
But no,
I'm sorry about that.
The bridge will come in its own time. The bridge will come in its own time.
Yes, I know. I'm sure.
And isn't it interesting that Hamilton this week has pledged his... Why didn't he do it in...
Where was he 12 months ago?
Where was he 12 months ago?
Aye.
Simon Hamilton, where were you 12 months ago? And everybody's saying, well done, thank you, Simon.
I know.
We should... can we reinstate... Do you know what we should do? In Warren Point, we get the Historical Society to do it. Do you know the stocks that you put outside in the square?
The pillory.
The pillory. And we put them in it and lock them in it. We could have... Who would we have? We would have Simon, he'd be in there.
Simon would be
Enda Kenny would be in there.
Definitely.
Peter Robinson would be in there. They'd all be there.
I'd be queuing up.
And we'd get old cabbages. No, we couldn't, because Philip, the greengrocer, doesn't have old cabbages. He's only got the very best of cabbages.
You wouldn't waste good food on them.
No, you wouldn't, but you'd keep them there in cold weather for a week.
Anyways, right, indeed.
But it's all right. Right, up to the moment. War stories. Warren Point Historical Society. Warren Point wasn't at war, but Warren Point was with the war, because many things happened there associated with the war.
Indeed.
Americans were there in Warren Point.
Right too,
you built ships in Warren Point
for D-Day landings
in Warren Point. Tell me how it all started.
Well, actually, that's not about the First World War. This is about this is about the First World War.
Okay, I'm listening.
And it's a lady with Newry connections as well.
Right.
I'll start from the beginning. I was coming out of Mass one morning, first Mass one morning about 5 years ago.
Yes.
And I got into a conversation with Sister Dolorosa, a local nun, so a Warren Point lady, who's retired. And she said to me, she asked me, she knew I went up and I trawled the archives in Newry and Armagh for stuff for the Historical Society and the Forum.
Yes.
And she says to me, did I ever come across a lady by the name of Sister Mary Bonaventure?
Sister Mary Bonaventure.
I said, never heard of it, the lady.
Nor did I.
No, so she asked me, she says she remembers her going to visit her when she was a young girl. Now, right away, this thing in my mind, it must have been in the 30s.
Yes.
When she was a child. That's my first mistake. I jump in, you see, And she lived down in Catherine Lodge. Now, do you know where Catherine Lodge is? Do you know where Charlie Carr's house is on the seafront?
No.
It's the modern house.
I'll tell you what I know. I know where... I know where the bookie's house is. I know where the seven steps are.
This side of the seven steps.
This side of the seven steps.
It's a big house back off the
Sits back off the road. That's
It's
Charlie's.
a modern house.
Yes.
The rest are all old Victorian houses.
I know it.
Well, that was Catherine Lodge. It was owned by Captain Harriet Main's family.
Yes.
He was an MD, served in the First World War, but the family had died out.
Main, that's an interesting name.
Aye.
Very
wealthy family.
There was a Main. Blair Main founded the
Paddy Blair Main.
Paddy Blair Main, SAS.
From the SAS man. I'm not sure if it's the same guy. I don't know.
Okay.
But by the end of the 30s, Catherine Lodge was a big house, a big rambling old house apparently. I don't remember it.
Okay.
Was given to the local nuns who were ill and infirm.
Yes.
And they lived there. And this Sister Dolorosa told me she used to go around to visit Sister Bonaventure. And she said she was a very warm person. Now, let's face it, this past few years, nuns have had a bad press.
They have,
and, this woman was a very lovely person.
Yes.
And I've since got that corroborated by a Mrs. Mary Lamb, who passed away a couple of years ago. She told me Mrs. Lamb died a couple of years ago. She was over 90. She said she was a lovely woman. And Mrs. Mary Cole, who remembers her father talking fondly about her family.
So what's the significance of Bonaventure?
Right. She asked me, the only thing she could tell me about her, the sister in Warren Point could tell me about her, she said her father was a high-ranking RIC man or a local dignitary, taxman or something, civil servant.
Yeah.
And that's what she could tell me about her. So armed with that, and I assume the 30s.
You're on the trail.
Yes, I got on the trail. So I started over there in the library in Newry and Armagh, and I started in January 1930. And I went forensically through the 30s. For must have been 6 to 9 months looking for information, and I couldn't find anything. And I felt a bit of a fraud. I was actually avoiding Sister Dolorosa, you know.
Yeah.
So I decided to avoid her, and I was changing tack anyway, because my mother's a Newry woman.
Yeah.
And her brother was in the British Army.
Who was you to her own name?
She was McCann. Do you remember Paddy McCann was on here a few weeks ago? Paddy was my cousin.
Ah, for God's sake.
Paddy's father and my mother were brother and sister.
Ah, sure.
So her brother was in at Dunkirk, and then he was in the Far East.
Okay.
And he was we were told he was in a prisoner of war camp with the Japs, you know, and he was wounded. So I decided, that had to be 1941 or so, 42, historical fact. So I started to look for him. I'd forgotten about the other thing. You know, as I say, I felt a bit of a fraud.
Okay.
And I found something about my uncle, and in a wee piece way up on the paper in 1941, I found an obituary, a couple of paragraphs. Sister Mary Bonaventure.
Oh, for goodness sake.
I was back on the track again, you know.
Wow.
So
that was a great moment.
I was energized.
That was a eureka moment.
I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
I couldn't believe it. So I went anyway, and Sister wasn't far away. Her father, this lady's father, Sister Bonaventure, she was 80 years of age when she died. By the way, she's buried over there in Catherine Street.
Yes.
This lady's father wasn't a high-ranking RAC man or a local
tax man, whatever, yeah.
He was the town clerk in Newry.
Wow.
From 1868 to 1908.
Bonaventure's father.
And her family name was, her father was Robert Hogg Doherty. Most unusual man. So I had more to dig on it. And
suddenly we're seeing the Hogg name for the first time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this man, now that I had his name, I found out about him, you see. He was a Lurgan man. And him and his brother, Richard Hogg Doherty, came to Newry probably in the 1860s. Not sure about the date now. And he worked for the Ulster Canal Company, who ran boats, a steam packet out of Newry to Liverpool in those days.
Yes.
And he was a great worker, a great administrator.
Yes.
And when the town clerk's job became available, he was urged to apply for that.
Okay.
And so he went and he got it. And he was, for 40 years, he'd done that job.
Yeah.
And he was appreciated and lauded by everyone. You know, they thought he was a good man. So that was it. I was quite prepared to go back to give that to Sister.
Yeah.
And he actually moved to Warren Point.
Yes.
And he was a councillor in Warren Point. And he was a councillor at the time the Baths was built.
Yes.
And Warren Point. So that's more historical resonance.
So this story takes a very interesting turn.
Yes. In my opinion, I think it's even better. Wow. So I was quite happy to go back and give that to Sister.
Yeah, this is what I've done. That's the information I've gathered.
And
she would have been pleased with that.
She was very pleased. So I was waiting anyway. I was collating more information, and I went back to 1929 to the papers because there was a hotel closed in Warren Point. You know, Thomas Street, the car park Thomas Street.
I do indeed.
That was a big hotel.
Wow. Opposite the Liverpool.
No.
The Liverpool was across the road.
It was called the Imperial Hotel.
Then, in those
and it
days.
was closed in 1929.
Yeah.
And I wondered, was there some link between that and the Wall Street crash? You know, So I was looking for that anyway. And something caught my eye on the paper. Another moment again. And it was Mrs. Ida Bodart visits Newry in 1929. Bodart, not a Newry name now.
Bodart,
not too many about Newry.
It's not one of the Omeath Bodarts. No, it wouldn't be. No.
So I said, what's all that about? And I delved even deeper. This lady was a cousin of Sister Bonaventure. Her father was Richard Hogg Doherty, a brother of the town clerk.
Yeah.
And when this lady, about the 1890s, sometime in the 1890s, when this lady was a young girl, lived from Newry, she was schooled in England and she went on to Brussels to become a governess or something. And she married a Belgian gentleman by the name of Bodart. I think it's Philippe Bodart.
Yeah.
And she had married and reared her family in Brussels.
Yes.
But then in 1914, the First World War kicked off. And there's a lady comes into the picture then called Edith Cavell. Right?
Edith Cavell.
The Edith Cavell, who was sanctified in England.
Absolutely.
She's a big figure in the First World War.
Absolutely.
There was a lot of men lost behind the lines. Yes. And she got them back to their own lines. A lot of Irishmen as well.
Yes.
Who were in the First World War,
Cavell.
And
what a woman, a heroine.
Yes, indeed. And
she's in this plot. She's in here as well.
Ida Bodart and her were bosom buddies.
Yeah.
And she helped Ida Bodart. Ida Bodart helped
her. In Belgium.
In Belgium.
So that was part of the route home.
Exactly, aye. And another gentleman called Buck, B-A-U-C-K, I can't pronounce it. And they helped the men to get back to their own lines. And after a while, the Germans caught them. They sent an informer in and they caught them. And Edith Cavell, as you know, and Monsieur Buck, and the Newry lady, Ida Bodart, was sentenced to be executed. Now, it was carried out with Edith Cavell. She was shot.
She was.
And the other lady, now, I'm not sure about this, Ronan, I have it somewhere. she either feigned madness or had a breakdown.
Yes.
And she spent the rest of the war in I think a lunatic asylum. Mrs. Baudard.
At least she was alive.
But she survived the war. And when the war ended, she was, not kidding you, she was, the French government, the Belgian government, they showered her with all sorts of tributes and medals.
Yeah.
And she became
because Edith wasn't there.
She was gone.
This is the closest to Edith they could get.
Exactly.
Yes.
You know, it was unbelievable.
The lady who helped
it's all
Edith.
There, so it is.
My
so
goodness.
Anyway, she survived the war, and then she got back to visit Newry in 1929 to visit her cousins.
My goodness.
And I just think it's a fascinating story.
Would Edith ever, by any stretch of the imagination, it's almost too much to hope for, have visited Warren Point?
I can't imagine. It's not to say it didn't happen. You know, she was a clergyman's daughter from Norwich in the west of England. That's the east of England, and I think they were Church of Ireland or Methodist or something. You know, very, very religious people. You know, and I've seen a film of it way back in the 30s. Anna Neagle. Remember the great actress Anna Neagle? She played her.
Yeah.
But then there's a famous film made in 1928 called Dawn. It was directed by a gentleman called Herbert Wilcox, who was allegedly born in Cork. And this man himself was a story, because along with Michael Balcon and Alexander Korda, they were the three great men of the British cinema.
Yes.
There was a deluge coming of ideas coming from America, and these guys stood up to the very powerful Americans, and they advanced the British cinema. So they made this film in 1928, and Ida Bodart was in it. Along with Sybil Thorndike. Sybil Thorndike was one of the great actresses. I think she was a Shakespearean actor originally.
Surely,
you know. So Ida Bodart, the Newry woman, was in this film. You know.
Tell me about the Historic Society. How are you all doing?
Well, we're trying to get the past into the present. You know, that's all we can do.
The story you've just told me now, I'm sure you published it.
No, I haven't.
Oh, you need to.
I know I do, but I'd need some more help with it. You know, it's a big, splendid story, and I wouldn't do it justice.
Well, I can give you a tip.
What's that?
I'll give you a tip.
Right.
50 years ago, when I started out in writing, 50 years ago, there was a man who was an author and a columnist with the newsletter called Patrick Riddle.
Remember him well?
Patrick Riddle wrote the book Fire Over Ulster about the Battle of the Somme.
That's right.
And I knew him because we were together in the first Alliance Party.
Right.
We were part and parcel of that. And I sent him my column, this side. This is advice for you. I sent him the column, big column from the Armagh Observer. I said, Patrick, I'm just starting this. I was under a pseudonym. I said, you tell me what you think. How is it? Because you're a very famous and good man. And he wrote back to me, he says, Rowan, very, very nice. He said, but I say this to you, and I say this to you now in relation to that. Cut, cut, and cut again. Stand naked as a Grecian statue. Be non-adjectival, cut, 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 and cut again. So I'm saying to you that you're building this into too big a thing in terms of your ability to do it.
Right.
And I am also saying to you, you're well able to put that into print as soon as possible.
Right.
And you should do it.
Right.
Because it's a huge story.
Well, can I just finish now about this lady?
Yes.
She died in the late 30s. And her father, he died in 1909. As I say, he left a house in Queen Street for the infirm and elderly nuns, which is still used today, as far as I know.
Yeah,
so that's
the Queen Street one. Is that the one?
Queen Street.
Is that the home? Is that where the home is?
No, across from the park.
Across from the park.
And the baz is at the bottom of the street.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So he left something for, you know.
Yeah.
And he was a very able man. And when he died in 1909, as I went through the newspapers, you want to see the stuff that was written about this guy. You know, I mean, it's very easy to say, he was a good guy, but apparently he was a good guy. You know.
Absolutely,
and he oversaw. He was in the town clerk when it was. Commissioners.
Oh, yeah.
And he oversaw the move from commissioners to democratically elected councillors. You know, I suppose that was a big thing too.
Well, surely.
But as I say, Warren Point can claim part of them too. You see,
I only discovered on Wednesday of this week, because I had the headmistress, the present headmistress of our ladies' school in Sister Mercy, Geraldine Pettigrew.
Another lady with Warren Point connections.
Absolutely. But I didn't realise that when the Sisters of Mercy came to Newry, sent by the Bishop of Dublin or whoever.
Yes.
They came to Newry all those years ago to educate, blah, 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 blah. But they had a first convent in Warren Point.
That's correct.
I didn't know that at all. It's amazing.
It was the hotel, the Great Northern Hotel. And that in itself, that Great Northern Hotel, fantastic history to that.
Absolutely.
Built by the Stanley family. And then I think they run into difficulties by the start of the century.
Hugh, do you sense that you're surrounded in Warren Point by the whispering guidance of good ghosts?
Yes.
Really?
Definitely. I would have been very cynical before, a couple of years ago, but this story here itself, like, I mean, it just fell into my lap, if you like, you know. And I kept ignoring it.
It was meant to be.
It was clawing away at me. It was clawing away at me inside.
Now you've
you know.
got it.
I've got it, you know.
Now you've got it.
But you know what I would also love to do? Somehow contact the Baudard family in Brussels. I'm sure there's great-grandchildren about somewhere.
Why don't you do it? Why don't you put a notice up on this social media thing that goes worldwide?
Yeah, indeed.
Put it out there. We want to talk to the Beaudarts. We have a story, blah, blah, blah. So,
and I'm sure they'd be interested in their Newry roots as well, you know.
Did the Historical Society come up with reasons why Warren Point was so well suited to build the landing craft for the D-Day landings?
Well, it was just a port, you know, and it was convenient, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just Warren Point was convenient.
I suppose the same reason why the port is successful today, onto the open ocean.
Well, you see, I suppose it's the most southerly port in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Ideally, it would.
Was it for the landings they made the craft?
I think it was.
Or were they called Liberty boats? I'm not sure about that. But I mean, we need to check that out.
I'm nearly sure they were all used at D-Day, you know.
One of the lovely things I find about Warren Point, I've known Warren Point all my life, Carlingford as well.
Yes, yes.
John Donnelly and I founded windsurfing on the loch by the
right.
windsurfing
Guys doing that,
centre all those years ago. But the lovely thing I find about Warren Point is its quaintness. People drop into shops and will talk to people.
Oh, indeed.
People stop and they'll have conversations. You know,
indeed,
people smile at each other.
I know what you mean,
But it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in Newry anymore. You know?
Warren Point's changing too.
Is it?
It is, aye.
How are you seeing it change?
Well, I mean, years ago when you went down to town, you'd have been all day talking to people. Now, people, I don't know, it's just the modern world, you know.
But nowadays, you'd be all day talking to Jackie McManus alone.
Well, if you could find Jackie, I know what you mean. Newry man.
He is indeed.
Newry man, aye.
Indeed.
Oh, we have a sure Newry man in Warren Point.
Yeah.
But then again, I suppose we send a few up to you say, you know. We sent yourself Harry the Hat. Harry
the Hat came to us.
And he's back in Warren Point.
He's back in Warren Point. Is he still playing?
I don't think so.
No.
He's over 80.
Yeah.
He's over 80, you know.
Well, you know, he was a clarinetist.
Clarinet or trombone man, wasn't he?
Yeah, trombone maybe. Yeah.
He was a great jazz man. Great jazz man, you know. Yeah. But the whole family were, you know.
Yeah.
But you mentioned there about Warren Point. You had another couple of men up from Warren Point recently. You had Patsy Carville up, the newspaper man.
Patsy was wonderful. Good man. He's living in Warren Point.
He's living in Warren Point.
He's a
and you had another
man.
gentleman.
Lovely.
Sorry, Reverend Norman Hutton. Warren Point man.
Norman's a great fellow.
Norman lived down below us when we were growing up in the late 50s and the 60s.
Yeah.
And Norman was a good man for cricket.
Well, as he would be.
There was a big garden. We used to play in Sherry's garden. And we'd play cricket. And my batting averages increased dramatically that year. Yeah. Thanks to Norman Hutton.
Can I ask you a simple question? Were there many windows put in?
There was a few. Well, I'll tell you one window was put in about a man. Do you remember a gentleman here, one of the political leaders here a couple of years ago when Tony Blair's government came, Desmond Brown?
Oh, yes.
He was a minister for political development along with John Reid.
Yes.
Well, young Desmond Brown, he's a barrister, but his mother's a Warren Point woman.
Oh, for God's sake.
And his father was from Ayr.
Yes.
And he was here during the war. He was in the sea.
He was a soldier in the West where he met the mother.
And he met the mother. And they moved to Ayr. So he'd come back in the early 60s to visit cousins. Yeah. So we lived in 4th Avenue in Warren Point. It was a big, well, it wasn't a big, it was a wee sprawling housing estate, you know. And we played a lot of football. And there was another family called the Hatties from Glasgow came. Oh, wild Celtic men. And Desmond Brown. So we had a game, Northern Ireland played Scotland in a game. Yeah. And we were going at it hammer and tongs. But this ball was bouncing this day. And Desmond Brown, he was about 9, let loose with his foot. And the ball spun away and went through a window, a big plate glass window. It smashed it. We were all pulled in. I think we got a hammering as well. The plate glass window cost about 10 shillings to get replaced. A king's ransom in those days.
Absolutely.
And he went on to become the Minister of Defence. And he was in charge of in Iraq when they went into Iraq that time.
I hope his exosets were better
than his football
kicks.
So I emailed him about that, but he didn't want to talk about that breaking of the window. Actually, and he done another good thing, which was he gave pardons to all the men who were shot in the First World War.
That's
and
right.
I was so glad because I'm passionate with those poor men. There was shell shock and all sorts of injuries. I mean, if I was in the First World War, I'd have been one of them. You know what I mean? It was terrible.
No, if we had been in the First World War, we would have been too intelligent to have gone over the top, because you had young, brave men being sent over the top by jackasses.
Oh, clowns.
Clowns.
Lions led by donkeys, they say.
Lions led by donkeys. Now, that was precisely it.
When I was growing up, I always heard about the Somme. And I always imagined there was no members, there were only members of the Unionist population.
Not at all.
But then I discovered
Catholics
about Gallipoli.
Yeah.
And the slaughter in Gallipoli was terrible. A lot of men from Warren Point went, And when they came back, they were never the same again. How would you be the same again after we went through that hell? No. Any war is bad.
Yeah.
But the Second World War, it seems to be a bit more glamorised.
Okay,
and there's nothing glamorous about it. There was
really the first one that we had popular films about.
Well, there you are,
over the years since,
I mean, even to this day, why watch that Private Ryan? And that would make you sick.
Yeah.
But those young men they got lad there.
Oh, absolutely.
It's terrifying, It's
very often lads who couldn't even vote.
Exactly.
They were being sent
slaughtered.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And some of those men, I worked with some of those men because when I started working in 1966, I worked with men who served in the Western Desert, and they were great men.
Oh, yeah.
But I tell you what, they were hair-trigger tempers.
Oh, but sure.
Naturally enough,
Yeah.
But I can only remember the First World War men as old men. They were old men, and they all say they wouldn't talk about it.
No.
They talk about it. How could you? Why?
You'd be buried in your trying to ignore it and forget about it and whatever.
And I've since come across some great letters, men sent home from the front. Captain Hall, that'd be Roger Holt's father.
Roger's
father. He sent a letter home.
Father.
Roger's father. He was out there when he was 19 or 20, and he took his whole the state workers with him, and he sent a letter home, and all he talked about. A man, probably you remember, James Heller. Do you remember James Heller?
You see, the man had the pub in Newry.
The pub in Newry, yeah. But he ended up living in Warren Point too.
Yes.
But he sent a letter home to the front, the madness and the mayhem of the Western Front. All he wrote about was, wouldn't it be great to riding about Dunamore in your Charger?
Wow. On the hunt. Out on the day.
I suppose it took away from the madness of the front. And another man from Estrever, Mr. Cole, wrote back from Gallipoli to his mother. And he was just saying, mother, or something like, he described the terrible, terrible conditions. And I'll tell you what, to me, it just comes alive. I couldn't have coped.
No.
It was terrifying.
No.
Absolutely terrifying.
But we were blessed in that certainly I was of an age that I was born in 1944.
Yes, I know you were.
So I was safe.
Yes,
I wasn't going to be conscripted to anything.
I've been no good with war.
No, I find it very hard to kill anybody. I wouldn't
I'd
be good
have
at it.
differently with that one now,
Yeah, if it was kill or be killed, I think I'd rather be saying, look, if you don't mind, I'll have to kill you. I'm dreadfully sorry, but it's me or you, and you've got to go. And by that stage, I would have been caught.
Exactly, aye. Even I'm at the stage now, when my wife starts the arguments in our house, I just walk away now.
That's a lovely thing to do.
Cut that out now.
If the Nazis had been women, they would have won.
They would have won.
Without a doubt. But it always fascinates me how in God's name they ever lost, because they were finely tuned Teutonic engineering magnificence, and we had the kind of army equivalents in England to Father Ted's and Father Jack's. It's madness, Dad's army
seemed
stuff.
That these big, tough, square-jawed guys, how would you tackle those guys,
It's amazing stuff. What did you do yourself in life?
I worked in Reeds.
For goodness sake.
I was in Reeds for over 35 years.
Were you?
I might have now. I hurt my back. I got invalidated out, But there's worse than me,
Yeah, of course there are.
As I say, in the supermarkets here, Tesco's there, I met an awful lot of guys I went to school with,
Of course.
And they're forever telling me about so-and-so's not well, or what I mean. And,
they're all over the place.
Guys that I went to school with, great characters.
Fingers of two hands, and more. I need to tell you the people who I was with: Paul Robinson, David Dunseith, Robin Harris. The whole list goes on and on and on of people I was in the BBC with.
Yes, all
gone.
Well, isn't it? Gone.
Jim Dougal, gone.
Jim Dougal's way, indeed,
And these are men I went to pay my respects at their wakes.
Yes.
And the men I was looking at in boxes,
I know,
they weren't the men that I'd been with.
I don't
totally
know.
Different. It's amazing stuff.
You take it with a pinch of salt as you get out. Once you hit 60,
you just need to be careful.
You have to be careful,
and watch yourself and be responsible for your own health. And that,
But Patsy Carville, the journalist.
Yes.
He was telling us a good one that he gave a talk to our society.
He did.
Before Christmas.
I remember.
It was about 6 months ago.
It is 6 months
ago. And when he got the editorship of the Sunday News.
Yes, Sunday News. Yeah.
He was telling us this great story. He had an impeccable source up at Stormont. This is 1965 now, before the madness and the mayhem took over.
Yes.
And he had a fantastic source up there, a great quotable source, you know. And he phoned him up on numerous occasions with great quotes, you know. But he phoned him up this day and he says, look, Patsy, he says, I have a great quote. He says, Captain O'Neill is going to Australia, become a viceroy or something, or a governor, you know. And Patsy says, this is true. He says, Patsy says, couldn't wait to get it into the paper. He says, you know, there's no foundation of it at all. And to make matters worse, the Sunday World only came out every Sunday, as you can imagine.
Yes.
It took a week
for it to recount.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So Patsy says, I took some stick from my editors, or from my board of directors. They took me in the hauled me over the coals over it, you know. And he says, it was terrible, the stick I had to take. He says, I kept away from Stormont myself for about maybe a month. I didn't want to meet anybody up there. So after about a month, I slipped up and I tiptoed around Stormont. And I was walking up here, nobody about. And who came out of the door? Captain O'Neill. Eton, educated,
absolutely,
old Etonian, you know, that type of a patrician politician.
Absolutely.
You know, absolute gentleman, he said.
Gentleman, you know.
And he was. Face to face to Patsy.
Yeah.
And he said to Patsy, Mr. Carville, where are you sending me this week? Where are you sending me? And he says, there's never another word about it. You know, lovely guy. Patsy swore back.
I would have as well. I was in the Independent in those days.
Right.
I was in King Street. That was our headquarters in King Street. And Jimmy Kelly was there as the political James Kelly.
The doyen of journalists.
The doyen, he was indeed. And James was great fellow. He'd breeze into the office at 5 o'clock in the evening, having been up at Stormont all day.
Right.
And he'd be there. I'm now 70. I was a boy of 23, 24 then.
Right.
And James would come in and he'd lift the phone and he'd dictate the copy to Dublin.
Right.
Or else he'd sit down at the typewriter. Blum, 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 blum. And he would do the copy out, and the copy would come out on pages, and he would then hand the copy to the old gentleman who operated the ticker tape machine.
Right.
And he would be there, take James's copy and start hammering James's copy, and the tape went chick, and he was sending that to Dublin on this machine. Goodness gracious. And then James, of course, passed away, and who else there? There was, the other day I opened the paper, Peter McKenna, dead. Peter McKenna was a journalist, started with me on the same day in the Irish Independent in Dublin, in Belfast. So I knew O'Neill at that time because I remember seeing O'Neill's People of Northern Ireland. It's time we're at a crossroads.
Yes, that's
I saw
the famous
that speech. I saw that speech in black and white television in the Independent office in Belfast on King Street. Yeah,
that man you're talking about, Patrick Riddle, Rydell.
Yeah,
I can remember him on, it's probably a talk show on BBC, along with A.T.Q. Stewart. Do you remember that gentleman?
Yes.
Great man.
He was a humanist.
Great humanist.
And he wrote about his island life off the west coast of Ireland.
People.
Yeah.
They were fantastic characters.
They were great people.
And I was going to say something else about...
Riddle always called himself Riddle, never Riddell.
Was it an Ulster name?
I don't know where it was, but he wasn't a citizen of any planet. He was on Planet Patrick, and that was it. He was
nice guys,
lovely people.
Nice guys, aye.
Very straight talking.
I would say so.
There's no missed things there. It's been great talking to you.
Ronan, thank you very much for having me.
You know that we're 35 minutes talking now.
You're joking.
I remember you saying, I couldn't go in, I don't know. I said, it'd be great, you'll break it. I've been proved to be correct.
There you are, indeed.
Yeah, we're going to play you some music. God bless you.
Gabriel's Oboe, no?
God bless you. I love Gabriel's Oboe. Yeah, we don't have it there.
You don't have it now?
We'll have something else. It'll be equally good.
Right, okay.